YouTube, I've never been a big proponent of the opinion that you see around the internet or the NBA media that the officiating in the NBA is bought and paid for by sports betting companies and stuff like that, and the refs have money on the games. But what we're seeing this year in the 2023-24 season has been, to me, unprecedented and honestly a little bit frightening if you're an NBA fan in regards to the NBA officiating and some of these egregious missed calls and blatantly wrong calls that we're seeing night in and night out in the NBA. Not only that, it's not just about the calls, it's about the way the league has handled the players and coaches addressing these calls, post game and in their interviews, just handing out fines like they're hotcakes to any player or coach that decides they want to, criticize the referees that game. And I'm sitting here thinking, while this is all happening, if the players and coaches are going to get fined for criticizing the NBA refs, if they can't do it, who is supposed to do it? Because we know that the fans' opinions on the referees isn't going to move the needle for the NBA in regards to holding some of these people accountable. So there's a lot I want to get into in this video. Are NBA refs betting on games? And has the NBA gotten out of control with handing out fines for players and coaches criticizing the NBA referees? Let's talk about it, folks. Now, I'd like to mention I was personally at the Sixers versus Clippers game just a couple nights ago, which was a wild finish to that game. I don't know if you guys saw it, but basically there were several challenges towards the end of the game where Nick Nurse challenged a couple calls towards the last couple minutes of the game, and Tyronn Lue ended up challenging a couple calls. And in my opinion, these results that we got from the challenges were absurd. I think most of them were wrong, so the reviews didn't even matter. In fact, they were so wrong that the officials who refereed that game actually came out and said that the last call on Kelly Oubre should have been called. It was a foul, and they didn't call it, which cost the Sixers the game. Nick Nurse and Kelly Oubre in the moment, in heat of battle, not getting that call. They got a little heated, I won't lie, and, approached the official in kind of an aggressive manner. But that's to be expected from competitive people who, basically those referees cost them the game. To be clear as well, Nick Nurse and Kelly Oubre both apologized for their actions in their post-game interviews, and nonetheless, they were both fined $50,000 for quote-unquote aggressively pursuing and verbally game officials after that loss to the Clippers. Now, again, I think that's a little ridiculous because nobody really holds these referees accountable. If Nick Nurse loses a game as a coach, it gets blamed on him. It goes on his record, right? The referees don't have records other than Scott Foster, and that's something I want to talk about in this video is Scott Foster's record while refereeing games that Chris Paul is playing in. My problem with the referees, again, I don't know if they're betting on games. I think that's kind of a leap. It's certainly something you can speculate on considering how egregious some of these calls are and the way these games are being officiated night to night. I think that's perfectly fine for fans to be like thinking that's happening, but how much truth that actually holds, I don't know, and I don't think we'll ever know the answer to that question, which is very unfortunate. But like I said, player or coach makes a mistake, they get fined. Referee makes a mistake, oh yeah, we missed the call, right? I understand that officials are people and they have a very difficult job and they do it better than anyone in the world, right? I get all that. We have the best referees that we can have, and they're gonna make mistakes, they're gonna miss things, of course. That's natural, and we should all give them grace in that regard. But when it's blatant and then someone gets upset about it and they get a technical foul because how dare you disrespect my authority type of thing, and then they get fined after the game, that's where I have to question, okay, what's really going on here? Is there something more going on? Because I'm just watching at home thinking, wow, this is pretty messed up, right? If the players and coaches can't be perfect and we know the referees can't be perfect, why are only one of those groups of people being punished and taking money out of their livelihood to reprimand them for their actions? That's what I don't understand. Like I said, I actually mentioned this in a video before, how I personally think referees should have to give a post-game press conference every game to have to deal with the media and some of those calls that they made. Again, I think we should hold them to the same standards that the coaches and players have to be held to because, they are just as important in some regard as far as their role in each game. How they perform is, like I said, very crucial game to game. I think there's a book of rules and you have to enforce them. It just seems like it's a little different this year. Am I crazy in thinking that? Let me know down in the comments. But the fines for the players and coaches criticizing the referees is really something that I have an issue with as an NBA fan personally, because like I said, this is, as far as I know, kind of a newer thing that's happening this year. And I'm just wondering, where is that coming from? I just don't understand how the NBA thinks that's a good idea. So as I mentioned, Nick Nurse and Kelly Oubre Jr., Rudy Gobert was fined $100,000 for directing an inappropriate and unprofessional gesture gesture toward a game official and publicly criticizing the officiating. Okay, so that one, that was the one where Rudy Gobert was making this gesture as if they were paid and stuff like that after a call. Again, that is absurd to me that he is fined $100,000 for that. I think regardless of how much money you make, and we know Rudy Gobert's contract details and stuff like that, but 100 grand is a lot of money. I mean, this is enough money. Like, it's just going to the league, right? So, gestures are one thing, right? But the way the league is putting these messages, like unprofessional gesture and publicly criticizing the officiating, that's the one I mostly have an issue with, is publicly criticizing the officiating. That rubs me the wrong way, because why can't you publicly criticize the referees? It's not like these players and coaches work for the referees, right? I understand if you're at a workplace and you publicly criticize your boss, right? You go on Twitter and say how you hate your boss and how he's doing a terrible job, and then your boss sees it. You should get punished for that, right? Like, I totally understand how a professional environment that could be seen as, something that will not be tolerated by the company or individual that is superior to you at your job, right? These players and coaches don't work for the referees. If they had said, publicly criticize Adam Silver or, the league office or something like that, or something that maybe isn't super warranted and, is a little disrespectful, I can understand that, right? But if you're just explaining how, you got robbed that game because of all these bad calls that are clear, everyone can see them, right? Everyone can see the calls that the referees miss. It's not like it's a subjective thing a lot of times. Like, sometimes it's really, really blatant, and you criticize that at a post-game press conference, and maybe you're not even disrespectful about it. 50 grand out the window. You can't do that. You can't say what we're all thinking, even though it costs you the game that you worked all day and night to play. So I think it's a real issue. I think it makes the league look bad, number one. I think it's basically silencing coaches and players to, just comply with whatever calls they're given, even if they're blatantly wrong. I understand when it gets personal and disrespectful, that shouldn't be tolerated, right? We should all treat each other with respect in a basketball game, right? The coaches, the players, the referees, everyone involved, right? The fans as well. A lot of times it's kind of a gray area there, but I have my own opinion on that, but that's for a different video. I think we should all, if it's a personal attack on someone, a gesture that maybe is very inappropriate, again, in a professional setting, I can understand why you would find someone for that, but just criticizing them for costing your team the game, or, even if you just think that they cost you the game, even if you're wrong, right? Like, people can be allowed to be wrong, just like the referees. The referees are always wrong. Only problem is nobody confronts them about it. I don't know what goes on behind closed doors with the league office, but they don't seem to be making any adjustments here. My point is that we all understand that refs are human and they're going to miss calls, they're going to make wrong calls. It's a matter of how they go about it after the fact, right? If you make a mistake and then someone points it out and, it's detrimental to the other person and what they're trying to accomplish, mistakes are fine, right? Especially when they're right more than they're wrong. But I also think you should be held accountable for making mistakes. And when it's blatant across an entire game of basketball, you should probably be investigated. Like Scott Foster, let's get into Scott Foster. Last time I checked, Chris Paul was like 0-20 against, any team that he's playing against, whatever team he's on when Scott Foster officiates his game. That is not a coincidence. That is not a coincidence, man. You cannot tell me that Scott Foster just happened to be officiating at 20 different losses. Again, I don't know the exact number. Maybe it's less than 20. Maybe it's more than 20. Who knows? But the fact that Scott Foster is allowed to still referee for Chris Paul is absurd to me. For Chris Paul specifically, the dude wins a lot of his games, and you're telling me this guy just happened to be at all of, these losses? That's just weird to me. Again, I got off on a tangent there. Let's get back to these fines here. The league's going to. Coach Tyronn Lue for the Clippers fined $35,000 for public criticism and officiating for questioning the integrity of game officials. Why can't you question the integrity of game officials? Why are they above players and coaches, right? The NBA media is going to fish for these, headlines each game from the players and coaches to where they say something they shouldn't say. And of course, emotions are high right after a loss where you feel like you've been cheated by the referees. Again, accusations and questions are two different things. If he accused them of being, bettors who are betting on their game, that's one thing. But if he just questions it, is he like, I don't understand the integrity. Like, are these guys seriously thinking these are good calls, or is something else going on? I don't think you should be fined for that. That's ridiculous. Like I said before in the intro, if players and coaches can't criticize the NBA referees, who is going to? That actually has a voice that matters around the situation. Like I said, the fans, our voices hold little weight in this regard. We've been criticizing the NBA officials since the dawn of time, right? Like, that's always going to happen. Even if they're right, we're going to criticize them because we're biased. The NBA doesn't care what we say about the refs. Players and coaches, on the other hand, if they're all upset, that's an issue that the NBA has to deal with. So I think fining them so that they don't criticize is very problematic for the league long term. And and it makes the league look bad, and it makes the betting allegations look even worse and more serious and more credible, because if you already think the referees are betting on the games, and then a coach or player questions that, or even just says anything in the slightest that would hint to that, and then you find that player, that's like admitting that something else is going on. I don't understand. Like, it's happening this year more than ever. Let's keep going here. Tyronn Lue, Trae Young fined for 35 grand for directing an inappropriate and unprofessional gesture toward a game official. Again, gestures are one thing. I didn't watch what happened, but I can understand gestures, right? Anthony Edwards, one of the league's brightest young stars, who the league should be interested in promoting and giving an ear to his opinions, fined $40,000 for repeatedly publicly criticizing the officiating. I don't understand what precedent they're trying to set here. Like, this is clearly a play that they're doing this season to, again, I don't know. Like, they should address it. They should be like, this is why we're finding players. Why can't you criticize someone, especially if you have, a good reason to? It's not like these are baseless criticisms that are coming out of nowhere. They feel they've been cheated. They go to the, post-game press conference 20 minutes later and say, with the emotions still running high, they say, oh yeah, those were terrible calls. I just think the officiating was bad this game and whatever, right? If it's a legitimate criticism or questioning, what is wrong with that? Like, what kind of authority do these people have where they're above criticism and questions? Like, I don't understand. Someone needs to hold them accountable, and we know it's not gonna be the NBA because they're actively trying to silence people that are trying to hold them accountable, and they're not gonna listen to us. This is just a whole mess, and I wanted to talk about it today in this video. Just a few more names I want to read. Mike Brown, head coach of the Sacramento Kings. Raptors, Darko Rajakovic. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Sorry, Raptors fans, if I didn't get that right, please let me know down in the comments. 25 grand for publicly criticizing the officials. That's a more famous clip where he's talking about, and I say the head coach of the Raptors, Darko Rajakovic, again, hope I didn't butcher that, is talking about how the Lakers had 20 more free throws or something like that in that game, which is almost impossible in a legitimately officiated basketball game to happen. I personally think he had a lot of weight to what he was saying. I don't find it baseless or, overly emotional. I think he had a lot of merit to what he was saying in that clip. Dylan Brooks, Ime Udoka fined 35 grand, 25 grand. Trae Young fined again for $25,000. Trae Young can't catch a break here. And, Paul George, $35,000 for public criticism of officiating. Again, a lot of these are gestures. If I'm not mentioning it, it's probably a gesture or a confrontation in game. The public criticism is, again, the issue I have. Grizzlies coach Taylor Jenkins, $25,000. So that's all just from this season. I mean, this is with all that money, someone should, get their calculators out and add up all this money. With all that money that the NBA is taking from these players and coaches' salaries for publicly criticizing the people that are actively costing these players games, and that the league is basically doing nothing about, they should be taking all that money and giving it to charity or something like that, because who even knows where that money goes? I would really hope it doesn't go right back into the owner's pockets or the league's pockets, but again, we just don't know. Or maybe I don't know. Maybe they've talked about it. Maybe there's a find fund, right? Anyways, I just had to talk about that. This has really been bothering me a lot, and like I said, I don't normally entertain the idea that the NBA referees are scamming or betting or have money on the game, but now I'm starting to think about it, and I just don't know, because there's a lot of shady stuff going on, especially the fines. The fines makes the league look bad. It makes the refs look even worse, and it holds more credibility to these betting allegations. That's about it for the video, though. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. Make sure you guys drop a like if you guys did. Subscribe to the channel if you guys haven't already. Thank you for watching all the way to the end. I really appreciate it. Love you guys so much. We're going to be talking about, topics like this throughout the year. Playoffs coming up, so I'm going to be dropping a lot of videos, as many as I can, really. And hopefully you guys have a fantastic rest of your day today. Hopefully your favorite NBA team wins their next game and isn't ruined by an official. And hopefully your player never gets fined for publicly criticizing the officials. I will talk to you guys in the next video. This is your boy D-Have, and as always, peace.